The void between stars held secrets, and Commander Kale Vandross was about to become one of them. His fighter's hull groaned as he pushed the engines beyond their thermal limits, plasma trails carving angry scars through the darkness behind him. The pursuit had lasted 18 hours, long enough for his water reserves to run dry, and his combat stims to wear thin. Through his cracked visor, the navigation display flickered with coordinates that made no sense. Deep space, no colonies, no stations, no reason for anyone to be out here except to die quietly. Mayday, mayday. This is Terran Defense Corps' flight designation, Raptor 77. Kale transmitted into the static. I am being pursued by unknown hostiles. My position. Is he paused, double-checking the impossible numbers? Sector 099, coordinates that shouldn't exist. The response came not from Earth Command, but from something else entirely. Human pilot. The voice was silk wrapped around broken glass, speaking perfect standard through his emergency channel. You have trespassed in sacred space. Surrender now, and your death will be educational. Kale's blood turned to ice water. No human colony had been this far out since the expansion wars ended. Whatever was hunting him had been waiting in the void between galaxies, patient as death itself. His fighter's sensors painted a terrifying picture. 12 contacts, each one twice the size of his interceptor, closing in perfect formation. Their ships moved like living things, organic curves flowing through space with predatory grace. No engine signatures, no heat bloom. They glided through vacuum as if swimming through their natural element. Negative on the surrender, Kale snarled, banking hard to starboard. I didn't come this far to feed your science project. A bitter laugh echoed through the calm. You misunderstand, little pilot. You were brought here. The distress signal you followed. The coordinates you found in that derelict station, all carefully arranged. We have been studying your species for some time. Your reaction to hopeless situations is fascinating. The truth hit him like a physical blow. The emergency beacon he detected 6 systems back, the automated message claiming survivors on a lost research vessel, had all been bait. He'd followed it like a fish following a lure, jumping from beacon to beacon, each one leading him further from human space. The Relani Collective has observed humans for 3 of your centuries. The voice continued, almost conversational now. Your violence, your unpredictability, your disturbing tendency to survive impossible odds. We required a test subject. Kale checked his weapon systems. To a time-matter torpedoes, a half-charged particle cannon, and enough kinetic rounds to maybe scratch their pain. Against 12 ships that had been designed by something that thought humans were interesting specimens. Here's what's going to happen, the alien continued. You will attempt to fight. You will display the berserk rage your species is known for. You will probably damage one, perhaps 2 of our vessels before we disable your ship and take you alive. Then begins the real experiment. The alien formations began to close, moving with mechanical precision. They weren't trying to kill him quickly, they were hurting him, studying his reactions, taking notes on human behavior under extreme duress. Kale's hand moved to the emergency beacon clipped to his chest. If he was going to die out here, at least Earth would know what happened. But as his fingers found the device, a different idea began to form. Something these creatures hadn't factored into their careful calculations. They'd made one critical error in their study of humanity. They'd given him nothing left to lose. Computer, he whispered, pulling up the ship's self-destruct protocol. How much did time matter in the engine core? The response made him smile for the first time in 18 hours. Enough. The first Relani ship moved with liquid grace, its hull shimmering like oil on water as it angled for the killing blow. Kale didn't give it the chance. He killed his engines completely, letting momentum carry him forward while simultaneously firing his maneuvering thrusters in a chaotic pattern to his pursuers. It would look like system failure, a panicking pilot losing control. Instead, he was calculating intercept vectors. The Relani ship swooped in, extending what looked like a metallic tentacle designed to ensnare his fighter. At the last possible second, Kale fired his engines at full burn, pivoting 90 degrees and raking the alien vessel with his particle cannon. The beam carved through the Relani hull, like a torch through tissue paper. Whatever their ships were made of, it wasn't designed to withstand concentrated human firepower. The vessel's graceful flight became a tumbling death spiral, hemorrhaging atmosphere and something that looked disturbingly like blood. Impossible. The voice on the comm had lost its silky confidence. Our hulls are adaptive biometal. Your primitive weapons should not Surprise, Kale interrupted, already lining up his next target. We primitive humans have been killing each other for 10,000 years. We got good at it. The remaining 11 ships abandoned their careful formation, anger overriding tactics. They came at him like a swarm of furious wasps, firing weapons that turned space into a light show of coherent energy and exotic matter. Kale danced between the beams, his fighter responding to controls made slippery with his own sweat, a near miss. Boiled away his port armor plating. Another scorch passed so close it melted his starboard sensor ray. But he kept moving, kept firing, kept doing what humans did best, refusing to die quietly. His first antimatter torpedo caught a Relandi ship amidships, the warhead's detonation creating a miniature star that expanded and faded in seconds. When the light cleared, there was nothing left but dispersing atoms. Down, he breathed, pulling into a climb that would have liquefied a normal human. His combat suit's medical systems pumped stimulants and coagulants into his bloodstream, keeping him conscious through maneuvers that should have killed him. The Relani ships regrouped, forming a perfect sphere around his position, their weapons fired in sequence, creating an inescapable cage of death that contracted with mathematical precision. Kale smiled and triggered his second torpedo, but instead of firing it at the ships, he aimed it at empty space, specifically at the coordinates, where their formation would be in 3 seconds. The warhead detonated in the center of their sphere, the antimatter explosion catching for ships in its expanding hellfire. The survivors scattered, their perfect coordination shattered. For the first time since the chase began, Kale heard something in the alien's voice that sounded almost human. Fear. What are you? The voice whispered. I'm a human pilot, Kale replied, using the chaos to target another ship with his kinetic rounds. The tungsten slugs punched through the biometal hull, sending the vessel spinning out of control. And you just learned why we don't make good lab rats. 5 ships remained, and they were learning. Their attacks became more erratic, less predictable. They'd stopped trying to capture him and started trying to kill him as quickly as possible. But Kale had been flying combat missions since he was 16, and he'd survived battles that should have been impossible. He knew how to read an enemy, how to predict their moves, how to turn their own aggression against them. He led them into a pursuit pattern, letting them think they were herding him toward an inescapable trap. But as they closed in, he executed a maneuver that no sane pilot would attempt, a full reverse burn that brought his fighter to a complete stop in space while spinning at 180 degrees. The Relani ships, moving at attack speed, suddenly found themselves flying directly into his firing solution. His particle cannon spoke again, and another alien ship died in a burst of superheated plasma for left. But his weapon systems were overheating. His engine was throwing warning lights across every diagnostic screen, and his life support was cycling through its final reserves. The voice on the comm had turned cold, clinical. Fascinating. You have exceeded all projected parameters, but this ends now. The remaining ships moved into a formation Kale had never seen before, something that made his targeting computer scream warnings about imminent death. They were positioning themselves to fire simultaneously, creating an overlapping field of destruction that would vaporize him and everything within 1,000 kilometers. Kale looked at his fuel gauge, his ammunition counter, his life support readout. All of them painted the same picture. He was out of everything except time, and he was running short on that too. Computer, he said quietly, initiate final protocol Omega-7. The ship's AI hesitated the first time he'd ever heard it do. That, Commander, that protocol requires. I know what it requires, Kale interrupted. Do it. The confirmation appeared on his screen, waiting for his biometric authorization. He pressed his palm to the scanner and smiled. You wanted to study human behavior under impossible odds, he broadcast to the Relani ships. Take notes. The Omega-7 protocol transformed Kale's fighter from a military interceptor into something far more dangerous, a kinetic missile, with a human brain guiding it toward impact. Every safety system shut down. The engine limiters disengaged, allowing the fusion reactor to operate at 300% normal capacity. The structural integrity field collapsed, letting the ship's frame flex and warp under the tremendous acceleration. Most importantly, the emergency beacon began broadcasting on every frequency known to human space, carrying a message that would ensure this battle became legend. This is Commander Kale Vandross of the Terran Defense Corps. His voice carried across the void, recorded for posterity. If you're receiving this, I'm probably dead. But I want every human listening to know they can trick us, they can hunt us, but they cannot break us. These alien bastards learned that lesson the hard way. The 4 remaining Relani ships opened fire simultaneously, their combined weapons creating a wall of coherent energy that should have erased him from existence. But Kale wasn't where they expected him to be. He calculated their firing solution and positioned himself in the one spot. Their overlapping beams couldn't reach directly between 2 of their ships. Using them as inadvertent shields, the energy meant for him instead cooked one of their own vessels, its biometal hull bubbling and warping under friendly fire. 3 left, but the effort cost him. His fighter's hull was coming apart, held together by nothing more than momentum and stubbornness. The cockpit filled with smoke as secondary systems overloaded, and he could taste blood where the acceleration had torn something loose in his chest. Impossible. The Relani voice had lost all pretense of superiority. You should be dead. Your ship should be debris. Should be, could be, would be, Kale coughed, wiping blood from his visor. That's the difference between us, you slimy son of a bitch. You think in possibilities, we think in necessities. He jinked hard to port, avoiding another coordinated barrage, but the maneuver cost him his last functional thruster. Now he was flying on pure velocity, unable to change course significantly. The Relani ships moved to exploit this weakness, positioning themselves to create another inescapable crossfire. But they'd forgotten that Kale still had one weapon left, his ship itself. He aimed directly at the largest of the 3 vessels and engaged the fusion drive at maximum burn. The engine, already operating beyond its design limits, began to tear itself apart. But it gave him the speed he needed. The Relani pilot realized what was happening just before impact. Its ship tried to evade, tentacles extending from its hull. In what might have been panic, but physics is universal, and momentum is the most democratic force in the universe. Kale's fighter hit the alien ship at 40% of light speed. The collision created a brief new star in the depths of space, visible from 3 systems away. When the plasma cleared, both ships were gone, reduced to their component atoms and scattered across the cosmos. But somehow, impossibly, Kale's emergency beacon continued broadcasting, not from his ship, which no longer existed, but from the suit beacon he'd activated at the moment of impact. The device, designed to survive planetary re-entry, had been thrown clear by the explosion and continued its automated distress call. The 2 surviving Relani ships found the beacon 40 minutes later, floating in space where no human should have been able to survive. They expected to find a corpse, or at best a dying pilot they could still study. Instead, they found Kale Vandross, alive inside a military-grade survival suit, holding a detonator connected to the beacon's power core. Surprise, he whispered into his suit radio, his voice carrying across their communication channels. Still here. The alien's response was immediate and furious. Energy beams lanced out, trying to kill him before he could act, but Kale had positioned himself carefully, using the debris field from the destroyed ships as cover. You want to know what makes humans special? He asked, dodging between chunks of twisted metal. It's not our weapons or our ships or our tactics. It's this: when everything goes wrong. When the universe is trying to kill us, when any sane species would surrender. He triggered the detonator. The beacon's overloaded power core didn't just explode, it created a cascade failure in the exotic matter that had powered the destroyed Relani ships. The debris field became a minefield of secondary explosions, each one triggering the next in an ever-expanding chain reaction. We get creative. The 2 surviving ships found themselves trapped in a maze of explosions, their perfect coordination useless against a threat that came from every direction at once. One vessel took a direct hit from a chunk of debris traveling at relativistic speed, its hull cracking like an eggshell. The other tried to escape, but flew directly into a plasma pocket created by the chain reaction. In the space of 30 seconds, the entire Relani hunting pack had been reduced to glowing gas and metal fragments. Kale floated in the center of the destruction, his suit's life support counting down the hours until he would join them in death. But he'd done something no captured human could have accomplished. He'd sent a message that would echo across the galaxy. His emergency beacon, still somehow functional despite everything, continued broadcasting not just his distress call, but the entire battle. Every word, every maneuver, every impossible moment had been recorded and transmitted across human space. Somewhere, on worlds he'd never seen, humans would hear this story. They learned that Commander Kale Vandross had been tricked, hunted, and cornered by an alien species that thought they understood humanity, and they'd learn what happened to species that made that mistake. But as his oxygen gauge dropped toward zero, Kale realized the story wasn't quite over, because somewhere in the debris field, something was moving. The movement in the debris field wasn't wreckage drifting on momentum, it was purposeful, predatory, and very much alive. From behind a twisted chunk of biometal hull, the largest Relani ship Kale had ever seen began to unfold itself. It had been hiding, cloaked among the debris, waiting for the battle to end so it could collect whatever remained of the human specimen. But the ship that emerged from concealment was no mere hunter. It was a mobile laboratory the size of a small moon, its surface crawling with technological growths that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Observation ports dotted its hull like compound eyes, and as Kale watched in growing horror, dozens of smaller vessels began emerging from docking bays that opened like wounds in its flesh. Magnificent, the familiar voice returned, but now it carried harmonics that made Kale's teeth ache. You have provided us with more data in one engagement than centuries of observation. But the true experiment begins now. The laboratory ships. Sensors locked on O'Kell's beacon, and he felt something impossible, a presence in his mind, probing at the edges of his consciousness like cold fingers searching for a way inside. We are the Relani Collective, the voice continued, and now Kale could hear multiple speakers. Dozens of voices overlapping in perfect harmony. We do not merely study species, we absorb them. Your memories, your knowledge, your capacity for impossible violence, all of it will become part of us. Kale tried to move, but his suit's thrusters were dead. He floated helplessly as the smallest ship surrounded him, their hulls extending capture fields that began dragging him toward the laboratory. But even as his body was pulled through space against his will, his mind was working. The battle had been broadcast across human space. Even if he died here, his species would know what had happened. More importantly, they'd know where it had happened. The coordinates had been embedded in every transmission, and humans had a long memory for enemies. You're making a mistake, he said into his radio, knowing they were listening. You think you understand us because you've studied us, but you've only seen us react to your carefully controlled scenarios. The capture field intensified, and Kale felt his ribs creak under the pressure. Around him, the Relani ships moved in perfect synchronization, like parts of a single organism. Enlighten us, the collective voice replied, and there was genuine curiosity beneath the condescension. What have we failed to comprehend about your species? Kale smiled inside his helmet. You've never seen what happens when we come looking for you. As if summoned by his words, space itself began to tear open. The first human ship to arrive was the TDC Retribution, a heavy cruiser that materialized from hyperspace in a fury of exotic particles and gravitational distortions. Its appearance was followed immediately by the Nemesis, the Vindication, and a dozen other vessels that had been racing toward these coordinates since Kale's beacon first started broadcasting. But it was the ship that arrived last that made the Relani laboratory begin an immediate retreat burn. The TDC Inexorable was a warship built for one purpose, killing things that normal weapons couldn't kill. Its hull was black as the void between stars, covered in sensor arrays that could track a single atom across a solar system. Its weapons weren't designed to destroy ships. They were designed to delete matter from existence. This is Admiral Rourke of the Terran Defense Corps, a voice cut across all frequencies. Hard as neutronium and twice as dense. Release our pilot, or we start with a laboratory ship and work our way down to whatever's left when we run out of targets. The Relani Collective's response was immediate and telling. They opened fire. Dozens of energy beams lanced out from the laboratory ship, each one capable of vaporizing a city. The smaller vessels launched weapons that bent space around them, creating gravity wells designed to crush the human fleet like insects. The humans fired back. The Retribution's main guns spoke first, antimatter warheads detonating in perfect sequence along the laboratory ship's hull. Where they struck, the biometal didn't just die, it screamed, the sound carrying across radio frequencies as the living metal experienced something it had never known before: pain. The Nemesis followed up with kinetic bombardment. Tungsten rods accelerated to 90% of light speed. They punched through the Relani ship's hull like bullets through tissue paper, each impact creating secondary explosions that rippled along the creature's nervous system. But it was the Inexorable that ended the fight before it could truly begin. Its primary weapon wasn't a gun in any conventional sense. It was a device that convinced matter it didn't want to exist anymore. The beam that emerged from its forward array was invisible to most sensors, detectable only by the absolute absence it created in its wake. It touched the laboratory ship's forward section, and everything within a 1,000-meter radius simply stopped being. The effect spread like a cancer through the Relani vessel's living systems. Biometal that had evolved over millions of years suddenly forgot how to maintain molecular cohesion. Organic circuits that had processed information faster than quantum computers found themselves trying to calculate with components that no longer existed. The laboratory ship's retreat became a rout, then a death spiral as critical systems failed in cascading waves. The smaller vessels tried to help, but they were dying to human particle beams carving through their ranks. Like a scythe-through-wheat dot in the space of 3 minutes, the Relani force that had hunted Kale across half the galaxy was reduced to expanding clouds of superheated plasma, but Kale knew this was just the beginning, because as the human fleet moved to recover him, his suit's sensors detected something else. Deep in the debris field, hidden among the wreckage, were dozens of other beacons, human beacons. The Relani hadn't just been studying one pilot, they'd been collecting them for years. The discovery of the other beacons transformed a rescue operation into something far more personal and infinitely more dangerous. 73 signals, reported the sensor operator aboard the Retribution, her voice tight with controlled fury. Human emergency beacons, ranging from 3 months old to 15 years. They're still active. Admiral Rourke's response was immediate and final. All ships, combat formation Alpha 7. If there are humans alive down there, we're getting them out. If there aren't, her voice dropped to something that could cut down it. Then we're making sure this never happens again. But as the human fleet moved deeper into the debris field, the void around them began to change. What they had taken for empty space started to ripple and shift, revealing the horrifying truth the Relani laboratory hadn't been alone. Massive shapes began to cloaking throughout the system. Not ships in any human sense, but living creatures the size of asteroids. Their hides covered in the same biometal technology that had armored the smaller vessels. They moved through vacuum like whales through deep ocean, their passage creating gravitational distortions that made space itself groan. Leviathans, whispered someone on the comm, using the only word that seemed adequate. They're Leviathans. The creatures, 12 of them, each 1 kilometer long, began to sing. The sound came through subspace, a harmony that bypassed human hearing and struck directly at the nervous system. Several junior officers collapsed at their stations, blood streaming from their ears. Even Kale, floating in his damaged suit, felt his vision blur as the alien music tried to rewrite his brain chemistry. Weapons free, Admiral Rourke ordered, her voice cutting through the psychic assault. All vessels, engage at will. Show these things what happens when you hunt humans. The battle that followed would be remembered as the Leviathan Massacre. Though which species earned that title would be debated for generations. The Retribution opened with a full torpedo spread. Antimatter warheads racing toward the nearest creature. The weapon struck its flank and detonated, creating a series of miniature suns that should have reduced any ship to vapor. Instead, the creature's hide simply absorbed the energy, glowing brighter as it fed on the destruction. Conventional weapons ineffective, reported the tactical officer. It's eating our attacks. The Leviathan's response was immediate and devastating. Sections of its hide peeled back like flower petals, revealing organic cannons that fired something far worse than energy beams. The projectiles looked like seeds, but when they struck the human ships, they began to grow. The frigate Perseus took a direct hit, and within seconds, its hull was covered in spreading biometal that ate through the armor like acid. The crew's screams carried over the comm as their ship was literally digested around them. Its matter converted into more of the alien technology. Perseus is gone, someone reported, voice breaking. It's still alive, but it's not human anymore. 2 more ships suffered the same fate before Admiral Rourke made the hardest decision of her career. Inexorable, target the Perseus, put her crew out of their misery. The absolute weapon fired, and the Perseus simply ceased to exist, taking its corrupted biomass with it into non-existence. But the sacrifice bought them critical intelligence the Leviathans couldn't absorb. What the Inexorable's weapon did, all ships, focus fire with exotic matter weapons, Rourke ordered. If it uses normal physics, kill it. If it doesn't, let the Inexorable handle it. The battle became a nightmare of coordination and sacrifice. Human ships darted between the massive creatures, their conventional weapons serving only to distract, while the exotic matter guns did the real work, The Leviathans, in turn, released swarms of smaller organisms living missiles that pursued the human vessels. With single-minded hunger, the destroyer Hammer died when a biomissile burrowed through its hull and exploded inside the fusion reactor, creating a brief new star. The cruiser Defiance lasted longer, its crew fighting hand-to-hand with boarding organisms that had eaten through the airlock, but fell when its life support was converted into something that breathed poison instead of atmosphere. But the humans were learning, adapting, doing what they did best when faced with impossible odds, getting creative. Captain Morrison of the Vindication realized that the Leviathans were coordinating through their song, sharing tactical information through harmonics. He ordered his ship's communications array modified into a sonic weapon, broadcasting discordant noise on the same frequencies. The effect was immediate and gratifying. The nearest Leviathan's song became a shriek of pain, its coordination shattered. It began firing wildly, its bioweapons striking its own allies as often as the human ships. All vessels, adopt Morrison's gambit, Admiral Rourke ordered. Jam their communications. Break their harmony. The tide of battle shifted as the human fleet became a cacophony of discordant noise, each ship broadcasting chaos into the alien's shared consciousness. The Leviathan's perfect coordination became confused desperation, as they lost the ability to communicate with each other, but the victory came at a terrible cost. Of the 15 ships that had arrived to rescue Kale, only 7 remained combat effective. The Retribution had lost her forward batteries. The Nemesis was venting atmosphere from a dozen hull breaches, and the Inexorable's exotic matter weapon was down to its last 3 shots. The surviving Leviathans, sensing weakness, began to close in for the final assault, their bioweapons charged with light that spoke of annihilation, their songs modulating to frequencies that made human bones vibrate with harmonic resonance. That's when Kale's voice cut through the chaos. "Admiral, I'm reading massive energy signatures from the debris field. The human beacons, they're not just distress calls. They're triggering something in the wreckage of the Rilani laboratory. Systems that had been dormant for years began to activate. The imprisoned human pilots, kept barely alive for study, were breaking free of their containment, and they were angry, very, very angry." The first sign that the tide was turning came from the debris field itself, where wreckage that should have been cold and dead began to pulse with bioluminescent patterns. But these weren't Rilani signals, they were human emergency codes, modified and weaponized by pilots who had spent years learning their captor's technology from the inside. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the TDC Shadowhawk," a voice crackled through the static. "Hoarse from years of disuse, but unbroken. We've been waiting for you bastards to show up." From the heart of the laboratory's remains, a grotesque hybrid vessel emerged, part human engineering, part Rilani biotechnology, and entirely dedicated to revenge. It had been cobbled together from salvaged human ships and living alien metal, guided by the collective knowledge of 73 captured pilots, who had never stopped planning their escape. But Vasquez wasn't alone. The wreckage field came alive as more hybrid vessels revealed themselves, each one a testament to human ingenuity and the absolute refusal to accept defeat. Some were little more than life support pods strapped to Rilani weapons systems. Others were complex amalgamations that shouldn't have been able to function, but did anyway, powered by human stubbornness and alien technology that had been tortured into compliance. "Jesus Christ," whispered someone on the Retribution's bridge. "How long have they been building this?" 15 years, Vasquez replied, her hybrid ship opening fire on the nearest Leviathan with weapons that merged human antimatter with Rilani bioenergy. "Ever since they took the first of us, we've been learning, adapting, and planning for this moment." The effect on the Leviathans was immediate and profound. These weapons weren't just destroying them, they were unmaking them at a fundamental level, turning their own biological advantages into weaknesses. The biometal that had evolved to absorb human energy weapons found itself poisoned by its own nature. When that energy was filtered through Rilani technology, the largest Leviathan, a creature the size of a small moon, began to convulse as hybrid weapons tore through its defenses. Its song became a wail of agony that carried across every frequency, a sound of something ancient and proud being forced to confront its own mortality. But the rescue pilots weren't content with just fighting, they were taking revenge for 15 years of captivity, experimentation, and the death of every human who hadn't survived the Rilani studies. "Remember Lieutenant Brooks?" Vasquez broadcast as her ship carved through a smaller Leviathan's flank. "He died screaming while they dissected his nervous system. This is for him." Another voice joined the channel. Commander Park, whose ship looked like a human interceptor that had been infected with alien technology. Remember the crew of the Destiny? They took them apart piece by piece to understand human pain receptors. Consider this our feedback. The battle became a symphony of vengeance as the rescued pilots unleashed 15 years of accumulated rage. Their hybrid weapon systems, designed by humans who had been forced to watch their friends die, were specifically calibrated to cause maximum suffering to their Relani captors. Admiral Rourke watched the carnage with grim satisfaction, but her tactical mind was already working on a larger problem. All ships form up on the hybrid fleet. We in this now, but we in it completely. The combined human force regular fleet vessels and hybrid revenge ships moved against the remaining Leviathans. With coordinated precision, the creatures, no longer able to communicate effectively through their disrupted songs, began to panic. Several tried to retreat, their massive forms accelerating toward the system's edge with surprising speed. No. Captain Vasquez's voice cut through the calm, hard as vacuum and twice as cold. None of them leave. Not one. Her ship, straining under the impossible fusion of human and alien technology, began to glow with energies that made nearby space. WARP and twist. The other hybrid vessels followed suit, their mismatched hulls crackling with power that threatened to tear them apart. Elena, what are you doing? Admiral Rourke demanded. What we should have done 15 years ago, Vasquez replied. We're making sure this never happens to anyone else. The hybrid fleet formed a perfect sphere around the fleeing Leviathans, their combined weapons creating a cage of destruction that nothing could escape. But it wasn't just firepower, they were using it with something far more fundamental. The captured pilots had learned to think like their captors, to understand the biological and technological fusion that made the Relani so dangerous. Now they turned that knowledge into a weapon of absolute destruction. The sphere of hybrid ships began to sing, not the harmonious melody the Leviathans used, but a discordant anti-song that attacked the very foundations of their biology. Where the Relani used sound to coordinate and strengthen their forces, the humans used it to tear them apart at the molecular level. The effect was immediate and terminal. The fleeing Leviathans simply began to fall apart, their biometal hulls losing cohesion as the frequencies disrupted the quantum bonds that held their exotic matter together. They died not in explosions of light and energy, but in slow-motion collapse as their own bodies betrayed them. The largest creature lasted the longest, its ancient mind struggling to comprehend what was happening, but even it could not resist the inevitable. Its final song was one of confusion and loss, a requiem for a species that had thought itself the apex of galactic evolution. In the space of 30 minutes, 12 Leviathans and their support fleet were reduced to drifting biomass and cooling metal. The threat that had hunted humans across the galaxy was ended, not by superior firepower, but by the one thing the Relani had never been able to understand about their prey. Humans didn't just survive impossible odds, they learned from them. As the last echoes of the anti-song faded from space, Admiral Rourke opened a channel to the hybrid fleet. Captain Vasquez, this is Admiral Rourke. Welcome home. The response came through tears and static, but the words were clear enough. It's good to be back, Admiral, but we're not done yet. Kale, still floating in his damaged suit, felt his rescue beacon finally go silent as the recovery shuttle matched his velocity, but as he was pulled aboard, he couldn't shake the feeling that this victory was just the beginning of something larger, because somewhere in the vast darkness between galaxies, other species were watching, and they had just learned that humans were no longer content to simply survive. They were ready to hunt. 6 months after the Battle of the Leviathan Fields, the ruins of the Relani laboratory had been transformed into something the galaxy had never seen before, a monument to human endurance built from the bones of their enemies. Commander Kale Vandross stood on the observation deck of the research station that now occupied the coordinates where he'd nearly died, watching as teams of xenoarchaeologists carefully dissected the remains of creatures that had once considered themselves humanity's superiors. The irony wasn't lost on him. The species that had studied humans as specimens were now being studied in return. The preliminary reports are fascinating, Dr. Sarah Chen said, joining him at the massive viewport. Her team had been working around the clock for months, unraveling the biological and technological secrets of the Relani collective. Their technology isn't just biomechanical, it's evolutionary. It adapts, learns, improves with each generation. Kale nodded, his attention focused on a piece of debris that drifted past the station. It had once been part of a Leviathan's neural cortex, but now it was just dead meat floating in vacuum. Any sign it's still out there? Other collectives, other hunting packs? That's the beautiful part. Chen smiled, and there was something predatory in her expression that would have made the Relanti nervous. We found their communication network embedded in subspace itself. Every collective, every hunting pack, every research expedition, they were all connected through quantum entanglement, across galactic distances. Kale felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's recycled air. We're connected, Captain. Vasquez and her hybrid fleet didn't just kill the Leviathans, Chen explained. When they used that anti-song weapon, they poisoned the entire network. The quantum disruption propagated through every connection, every link, every node in there. Collective consciousness. She pulled up a holographic display showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, dotted with red indicators that were slowly winking out. We estimate that 97% of the Relanti collective died in the first hour after the battle. The remaining 3% lost their connection to the network and are essentially lobotomized. Unable to function as anything more than individual organisms, Kale stared at the display, watching as the last few red dots faded to black. An entire galactic spanning civilization, millions of years old, reduced to scattered survivors in the span of a single day. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like something far more profound and terrifying. We didn't just win a battle, he said quietly. We committed genocide. Chen's smile didn't waver. They started it when they decided we were interesting specimens. We finished it by proving them right. Through the viewport, Kale could see the hybrid fleet maintaining its patrol around the research station. The ships had been cleaned up, their jury-rigged systems replaced with proper human technology. But they retained the predatory grace that came from years of survival in enemy territory. Captain Vasquez had been offered command of any ship in the fleet. Instead, she'd chosen to lead the new deep patrol human vessels, tasked with hunting down any remaining Relanti survivors. The other species are taking notice, Chen continued, changing the display to show intelligence reports from across known space. The hegemony has recalled all their exploration fleets. The synthesis worlds have gone completely silent. Even the Eternal Compact is reinforcing their borders. Good. Admiral Rourke's voice came from behind them. The veteran officer had arrived on the morning show, her weathered face bearing new lines that spoke of sleepless nights and difficult decisions. Let them be afraid. Let them all know what happens when someone mistakes human curiosity for human weakness. She joined them at the viewport, her reflection ghost-like in the reinforced transparent aluminum. The brass back on Earth wants to know if we should be concerned about retaliation from other species. I told them we should be concerned about not being aggressive enough. Kale turned to face her, seeing something in the Admiral's eyes that reminded him of the moment before he decided to ram the Relanti ship. You're talking about expansion. I'm talking about survival, Rourke corrected. The Relanti studied us for centuries before they decided to start collecting specimens. How many other species are doing the same thing right now? How many are watching our borders, cataloging our strengths and weaknesses, waiting for the right moment to strike? The answer hung in the air between them, unspoken but understood. In a galaxy full of predators, the only safety lay in becoming the apex predator yourself. The Deep Patrol isn't just hunting Relanti survivors, Rourke continued. They're scouting beyond our traditional borders, looking for threats before they become problems. And what they're finding is interesting. She activated her personal display, showing reconnaissance footage from the edge of human space. Alien structures drifted in the void, monitoring stations, research platforms, vessels that fled the moment human ships appeared. We're not the only species they were studying, Kale realized. No, but we're the only one that fought back successfully, Rourke replied. The others are either extinct or enslaved. That makes us valuable allies or dangerous enemies. A new voice joined the conversation, Captain Vasquez, her image appearing on the holographic display as she transmitted from her patrol ship. Deep in unexplored space, the years of captivity had left their mark on her face, but her eyes burned with the same fire that had driven her hybrid fleet to victory. Admiral, we've made contact with survivors from the Kithara hegemony, she reported. Their entire species was harvested by the Relanti over the past decade. Less than 1 million individuals remain, scattered across refugee ships. Are they hostile? Rourke asked. No, ma'am. They're grateful. They're asking if they can join the Terran Defense Corps. Kale felt the pieces clicking into place. The battle at the Leviathan Fields hadn't just been about revenge. It had been about establishing humanity's place in the galactic order. The species that had once viewed humans as primitive newcomers were now seeing them as liberators, protectors, the only force capable of standing against threats like the Rilani. Tell them yes, Rourke said without hesitation. Full citizenship, full integration into human space, but they serve under human command and they follow human rules. Understood, Admiral. What about the others? Others? We've detected 17 different species in this sector alone, all of them Rilani survivors. Some are barely sapient after years of experimentation, but others have been keeping detailed records of everything that was done to them. Everything they learned about Rilani technology, biology, weaknesses. Dr. Chen leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution. Are they willing to share that information? For a price, Vasquez replied. They want protection. They want to be part of whatever comes next. And they want the same thing we wanted, revenge against the species that thought they could hunt us. Without consequences, Admiral Rourke was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the debris field that had once been humanity's greatest threat. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of decision that would echo through history. Captain Vasquez, you have new orders. The Deep Patrol is now the Liberation Fleet. Find every survivor, every refugee, every species that was victimized by the Rilani or anyone like them. Offer them the same choice we're giving the Kithar. Join us, serve alongside us, and we'll make sure nothing like this ever happens again. And if they refuse, then we leave them to their fate. But we make it clear that neutrality is not an option. In this galaxy, you're either with humanity or you're on your own. Kale watched as the holographic display updated with new intelligence, reports, new contacts, new possibilities. The galaxy was vast, full of species both ancient and young, powerful and weak. Some would join humanity's growing alliance out of gratitude. Others would do so out of fear. A few would resist, choosing to face the darkness alone rather than accept human leadership. But one thing was clear: the age of humanity hiding in the shadows was over. There's something else, Vasquez added, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. We found recordings in the Rilani archives. They weren't the only ones studying us. There are others out there, older and more dangerous. The Rilani were just the first to make their move. Then we'd better be ready for the second, Rourke replied. As if summoned by her words, a new signal appeared on the station's long-range sensors. A ship was approaching from the galactic core, its design unlike anything in human databases. It moved without visible engines, its hull seeming to bend light around itself in patterns that hurt to observe directly. Unknown vessel. This is Admiral Rourke of the Terran Defense Corps. She broadcast on all frequencies. State your intentions. The response came in perfect standard, spoken by a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Greetings, Admiral. We are the architects of the spiral's end. We have come to congratulate humanity on its graduation. Kale felt his blood turn to ice. Graduation implied a test, and test implied teachers, which meant somewhere in the galaxy, something had been watching humanity's battle with the Rilani, something that had wanted to see how humans would respond to existential threat. Graduation from what? Rourke asked, her hand moving instinctively toward her sidearm despite the fact that the unknown ship was still thousands of kilometers away. From prey to predator, of course. The Rilani served their purpose admirably. They forced your species to reveal its true nature. Now the real test can begin. The signal cut off, leaving the humans staring at each other in growing understanding. The Rilani hadn't been hunters at all. They'd been a final exam, and something else entirely had been grading the results. Admiral Rourke was the first to break the silence. Captain Vasquez, double the patrol schedule. Dr. Chen, I want every piece of Rilani technology analyzed and weaponized within 6 months. Commander Vandross, she turned to face Kale, and he saw in her eyes the same expression he'd worn when he decided to ram an enemy ship rather than surrender. I want you to take command of the new contact division. If there are other species out there using us as test subjects, I want to find them first, and I want to make sure they understand that humans don't just pass tests, we rewrite the curriculum. Kale nodded, feeling destiny settling around his shoulders like a familiar coat. He'd been tricked into a battle he couldn't win, survived through stubbornness and spite, and accidentally triggered a galactic war that had reshaped the balance of power across known space. It seemed only fitting that his next assignment would be hunting the teachers who had designed the lesson plan. Understood, Admiral. When do we start? Through the viewport. The unknown ship hung in space like a question mark made of shadow and starlight. Waiting, watching, judging. We already have, Rourke replied, the moment that first Relani ship decloaked. Humanity stopped being students and started being the lesson other species needed to learn. She gestured toward the debris field, where human and alien technology worked side by side to build something new from the ashes of the old. They tricked the human pilot into a battle he couldn't win. But they forgot the most important thing about humans: we don't believe in unwinnable battles. We just believe in changing the rules until we're the ones writing them. The observation deck fell silent as the three humans contemplated the vast darkness beyond their station. Somewhere in that darkness, ancient species were reassessing their plans. Younger civilizations were choosing sides, and predators were learning that Earth's children had grown teeth. Commander Kale Vandross had crashed into their destiny, and, in doing so, had crashed their destiny into his own species' relentless will to survive. The galaxy would never be the same dot, and somewhere in the deep black between the stars, something very old and very patient began to plan humanity's next test. The question was no longer whether humans would pass. The question was whether their teachers would survive the grading process.